Welcome, everybody, to Rico 12. I'm Justin. I'm a host and a beautifully imperfect, stumbling, bumbling child of an absolutely powerful and perfectly loving God and an addict living in the miracle of recovery. Rico 12 is all about exploring the common threads of addiction and sharing tools and hope from those on a similar path. We gather from diverse backgrounds, faiths, and places to learn and support one another. Our speakers are members of various fellowships and deal with various addictions and afflictions, thus showing the common threads of recovery no matter our addiction or affliction. Today's speaker for the 289th meeting is Dennis T. Dennis has spoken on Rico 12 a few times before, and we're grateful and excited to have him back. Staying connected in recovery's garden is his topic today, and I look forward to hearing that message here in a few minutes. First, for just a little bit of business. Rico 12 does have several recovery resources in our family of podcasts and social media communities. To learn more, listen more, connect more, just hang out and be with us. You can check out the other podcasts that you can find at reco12.com. That's RECO12.com. And to join our social communities, you can check the chat in the live meeting or in the show notes of the podcast if you're listening there. Rico 12 is self-supporting, and your contributions help us continue our mission. Thank you to all of our spearheads, past, present, and future. Your donations really help in this project. If you also feel the desire to become a spearhead and support this cause, please visit reco12.com/support or follow the links in the chat or in the show notes. We're there on Venmo, on PayPal, and you can do it through the website also. Your support, not just financially, but especially with your word of mouth, helps make a difference in keeping us able to share these messages of recovery. We look forward each meeting to receiving from the light reflected from our speakers. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now let's introduce our guest speaker for today, Dennis T., and give a little background on him before he starts his share. Dennis T. from Alaska joined SA on July 29th, 2014. After 40 years of searching for a solution, he was finally introduced to SA at age 52. He asked for a sponsor on day one and has worked his program every day since. He states that helping another sexaholic through the steps brings about the greatest connection to his higher power than anything else. Being used by God on a daily basis has changed his life and his relationships. Living free one day at a time by utterly abandoning himself to his higher power has given him a new way of life. Take it away, Dennis. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Justin. And thank you for everybody that's here today. I love the opportunity to work this program because I always feel closer to my higher power when I do and I serve. So let me start with a set-aside prayer. God, please set aside everything I think I know about you, about us, about these 12 steps, living life, and especially spiritual matters, so I can have an open mind for a new experience with all these things today, and help me see your truth and whatever is shared today. Amen. So the other day, I love my prayer time in the morning. I love getting up. When I wake up, usually I can feel God's presence moving, and I slide right out of bed and I go through my prayer work. And it came to my mind the other day when I was going through my 10th step. I usually share, like, God, please direct my thinking today, especially divorcing it from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. Show me the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. And thank you for your power that I may continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And when these crop up, and I thought, I think I want to change that to when these show up. And I thought about the word crop up and what Bill could possibly, why he would use a word like crop up. And it really dawned on me that throughout his entire bringing us through the steps, he uses this metaphor of plants. And so I went back and I remember when he shared about himself that it was taking root and branch. And I remember I'm back on 62, page 62. When we get into the third step, it starts to introduce me into this third step. The we agnostics didn't introduce me to a power greater than myself. I had a very strong faith tradition. What we agnostics introduced me to was the power that I was relying upon, or the lack of power, or the insanity, the darkness that's in constant fear that I've been relying upon my whole life. But it says on page 62, when it wants to try, as we go into the third step, describe what it is that is my illness. It's not the drinking, it's not the lusting, it's not the food that I can abuse or medicate with. All those are just symptoms to medicate my separation from my higher power. No, what it really is it's this, I call it the self's will, the ego, the voice that's constantly trying to have that control. And on 62, it says selfishness, self-centeredness. Those are descriptions, but it's really the self or the ego is wanting to introduce me to. And it says that we think is the root of our troubles. And there it is, the root. And a root for a plant feeds it nutrients, it's life-giving. But in this case, this root, what it feeds, it tells me I'm being driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. And what I have to come to realize is that back on 84 in the big book in the fourth edition, where it tells me when these crop up, it's important for me to continue to watch for those things, because when I'm connected to the power, I'm free. When I've utterly abandoned myself to God, I'm free. And if I need to be actively seeking that connection all through the day, not just when I slide out of bed in the morning, but all through the day. And I do it now. I started to do it so I could be free from my temptations and my addiction, but I do it now because I just want to be with him. The joy and peace that comes from connecting to that power is so powerful. So when it tells me that these things are going to crop up, these are the weeds in my garden that are going to disconnect me. If I'm not actively seeking God, then I'm actively drifting back into self. That's my default. It may not be others, but that's what I can see happening. And I don't have to, like, every second of the day, I just get to continue with that spirit that's in me to watch for any of these things that are cropping up. And I always see them, and they're as they come as a disturbance. They come up as a disturbance, but they're an indicator that self is taking back over again. Because it tells me that when these crop up, selfishness, dishonesty, especially resentment, and the big one is fear. And I kind of believe that they kind of come in the reverse. I think fear is the beginning of all of these. If I'm in fear, it leads to resentment, it leads to dishonesty, it leads to selfishness. And all of those are an attempt for me to try to control so that I can get what I need. Because if I'm separated from the power, I have an emptiness in me. I'm suffering. And I need everybody and substances to try to relieve that pain when there's only one thing that's ever going to relieve it, and that's the connection to the power. So I have a garden, if you'd like to think about that, or a little acre of land. And I don't know what they call it in other countries, but my purpose is to stay in my own lake acre of land. And that's where I do my gardening. I look at myself when I go outside of that and I start looking at other people's, how they're doing this, or how I lose my peace and serenity, and I leave the present moment. So if I want to keep my garden clean so that I can stay, the whole purpose of keeping it clean and watching for these plants that are going to crop up is so that I can stay connected. And when they first crop up, say a resentment first busts through the soil, it's at its weakest, most vulnerable point. And it can be much just like a temptation for anything else that I want to use. Just like I can take a drink of lust or a drink of alcohol or drugs, I can take a drink of resentment. And in my experience, when those crop up, it could be a voice going, "Hey, did you see what they just did?" I'm like, "Whoa, no, no, I don't want to listen to that." Because if I entertain it, debate with it, or take a drink of it, it just waters it. Those roots get deeper, the plant grows stronger, and I get tangled up in it, and it can take me out. So if when I see them first crop up, I want to immediately go to my higher power. That is a, I've heard it said, and it does say on page 66 that when harboring such feelings, I'm shut off from the sunlight of the spirit. the insanity of lust returns and I drink again, and to drink is to die. I always believed that the resentments or the defects separate me from God. And I don't so much believe that anymore. I believe now that the resentments, the separation, and the resentments and the disturbances are an indication that I'm already separated from the power. I've already let up and just drifted back. And that's the process. And if I stay there long enough, I take a drink of that resentment or take a drink of that fear, the next thing that is coming is going to be um, a temptation to use some type of substance to medicate my disconnection. So, really, where I need to stay is in that garden, continuing to watch when these weeds are going to pop up. That's the main thing. And if I can catch them, a gardener doesn't do a bunch of gardening all day long. They pick a few weeds in the morning and then they enjoy the garden the rest of the day. And so when these crop up, I get to go to my higher power. There's all kinds of tools. So using those tools gives me the ability to stay connected to my higher power. When I do little bits of recovery, I don't try and read a lot because I think I like to just read just a little, whether it's spiritual literature, whether it's recovery literature, because I have to know why am I doing it in the first place? If I'm doing it to please my higher power, I think it's the wrong motive. I do it to please me. And I think my higher power is most pleased with me when I'm most pleased with him. And so I like to read just a little bit and stop and meditate on that. And I want to move on because it's like, oh, this is a good spot. But I leave it till my night. I work in the morning and a little bit at night. And it kind of gives me something to look for. But the big book gives me all kinds of tools, gardening tools. And it's one thing to read about them. It's another thing to read about them and know where they're at and understand them. But really, where the power comes is when I use them, when I use those tools. And here's the ones I want to talk today. And I'm sure the book is full of them. I'm going to only pick a couple about. We only got so much time. But I love in the big book where it says, we ask or ask. Anytime it's doing it, that's an instruction for prayer. That's an instruction to turn to my higher power. On page 59, it starts, when it gets into it, says, half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked. When I say we asked, that's an instruction from the big book to give me a tool to use prayer, to go to my higher power. So we ask his protection and care with complete abandon. Now, that's one thing to read it, but am I going to ask for that really on a daily basis or every other day or sometime? God, I need your protection and care. And I need to completely abandon, because when self takes back over, it's in control. There is no, I don't believe I have 5% of control and God has 95. I think it's all or nothing, because my higher power won't override my free will. And as soon as my free will takes over, my higher power waits for me to come back. I love on page 68, it says that, and these are some of the prayers that I incorporate in my morning time. But it says, we never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We ask. There's an instruction again. This is one of the most important prayer tools in the fear inventory that there is. I use this tool. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. Not do, but be. And there's many times when I wake up, I slide out of bed, and I start my prayer, and I don't feel God's presence. I'm like, oh, what's going on? So I stop, because I don't want to just rote or just say my prayers to get through them. I say, God, what's happening? And he'll always show me, oh, you have a little bit of fear here. So I go through the thing. God, help me to humbly rely upon you. I pray this fear of this. Direct my attention to what you would have me be. Then I sit quietly and wait. And he gives me 3 or 4 words. Recently, I had something come up where I was worried about, in a camp I was going to, some guys that banter would banter toward me. And I didn't realize I have fear around that. And so the four things it gives me is courage, which is fear that said its prayers, loving, kind, and defenseless. And when I heard defenseless, I thought, whoa. It tells us in the page before that we set in trains of motion these circumstances we feel we didn't deserve, but didn't we set the ball rolling? If I would have showed up into that camp, not realizing, not taking care of this, that weed would have grown and I would have been all defensive. And they would be like, whoa, what's wrong with him? And I'd never met him. The very thing I was afraid of may have brought it. I may have been the catalyst for it. I showed up. I was defenseless. I trusted God. And we get to ask if I'm having courage, fear that said its prayers, I'm being loving, kind, and I'm living defensive. Do I really, and I'm relying upon God, do I really have to have this fear? And the answer is no. One of the biggest ones I love that it's an instruction for we ask is on page 76. This is a spiritual tool that keeps my garden clean. We've emphasized the willingness as being indispensable. Step 6, we are now ready to let God remove from us all the things we've admitted are objectionable: fear, resentment, self-pity, the self-delusion, self-seeking. All of those things are objectionable. But the big one is my ego and self-will. It says in Bill's story on page 14 that a price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self. That's what it has to be paid. But it tells me here, can he now have them all? Every one. If we still cling to something, we will not let go. Now, here it is. Here's the tool. We ask. Okay, whatever comes after we ask, that's not something I just read. It's something I practice. What am I going to ask for? God, help me to be willing. Man, if a resentment pops up or crops up, and instead of immediately taking care of it when it's at its weakest, I water it by entertaining it, thinking about it, listening to that voice. It's going to grow. And in that moment when inside's going, Dennis, pray for the person you're resenting. Go to God about this. And I don't want to because I'm like, well, did you see what they did? Man, I'm in real danger in this program. So if my first instinct is like, whoa, no way. And if I don't recoil from it, I need to ask for the willingness to ask God to have the willingness. And there's been times where I wasn't willing. I prayed this simple prayer, God, help me to be willing. And within seconds, I was willing. And that's the crazy part about this is just how God works in that if we'll use these we asks or we add them into our prayer work. Back on 84, when the whole thing we were just reading, we continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And when these crop up, the next word is we ask. Okay, there it is. Well, I ask God to remove it. We discuss them with someone immediately. I make amends quickly. If I've harmed anybody, then I resolutely turn my thoughts to someone I could help. That's 4 through 9 right there. But I have to ask. I go to God. All of the things that connect me and keep me connected is me going to God, making an active, an active action to go to God. When I first came in this program, I had a very strong faith tradition, but my faith tradition couldn't do anything for my sexaholism. And I would always think, oh, I can't wait to spend eternity with God in heaven. But I couldn't stand to spend 5 minutes with him here on earth. My nature, even in my faith tradition, was rebellion against God. And that rebellion, like it says on page 14, that's the rebellion. That's the self's will, the ego. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. It meant the destruction of self-centeredness, my ego, my pride. I must turn in all things, to the Father of the light who presides over us all. By we ask, I keep asking, I keep seeking. I have no power. I cannot fight those resentments. I can't fight this. And if I stay in that and they grow, I'm going to start lusting or needing to eat food to medicate or, whatever my addiction may be at the moment. So I need to keep turning to deflate the self, the destruction of self. Last ones I'll say is on 87 here. Beautiful ones. And this is the 11th step. And this one I use in my morning prayers. I love it. it says that we usually conclude the first full paragraph. We usually conclude the period of meditation, not writing, just being with God in his presence, with a prayer that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be. And when I get done with my, uh, I do the 11th step, St. Francis prayer. I say, God, show me your knowledge of your will today and the power to carry that out. Show me what my next steps are to be. Provide what I need for such problems. And it says, we ask. There it is, man. That's a big one, especially for the freedom from self-will. From self-will. We always put apostrophe S. It does say self-will. But there's another one we ask. And I can get tangled up in a resentment. I can do a prayer and work about it. But if I'm still in self when I'm free from that resentment, it's amazing. I've watched it. I just immensely find something else to resent. It's because the self is still present. Sometimes if I feel one of those cropping up, the simple prayer is like, hey, God, I just want to be with you right now. Please remove this self's will. And bam, I ain't listening to that voice. I'm free. I'm connected to God. I feel peace and serenity. When I connect to the power, it's my comfort. So if I'm needing comforting, then I'm not connected to the power. The last thing it says here, or on the bottom of 86, it also says in thinking about our day, we may face indecision. How many times in my day do I face indecision? We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here, we ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought, or a decision. We relax and take it easy. That's simple. Hey God, please give me an intuitive thought or decision. Mine isn't those exact words. Mine is when I connect, it's like automatic. It's like my thinking changes because I'm going from a thinking that's filled with fear, resentment, anger, trying to run life. I mean, imagine how scary it is to try to actually run life on my own versus turning it over to God, which to me is the light. I leave the darkness to go to the light. And my thinking is different. I just feel okay. I don't, if I'm disturbed, it's somebody can't disturb me. If I'm disturbed, it's always something to me because I'm back in the darkness. But the last one's on the bottom of 87. As we go through our day, we pause. And I think that pause is one of the most important garden tools that I use. Because if I feel urgency, that's the big one for me. That's where my wife says, here comes the chaos, right? If I feel urgency, I'm gonna scat like my wife says, I'll throw a grenade in on us. We're getting ready to do something fun. And I feel some urgency. I need to pause. Um, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask. There's another ask. So every time we find a place in the big book that says ask, pay attention to it, write it down, practice it. So what am I going to pause? I'm going to ask for the right thought or action because we constantly remind ourselves that we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day that thy will be done. If I'm in self, it's going to be my will be done. And everybody around me is going to suffer. I'm going to suffer. And so my goal is to not just connect to the power, but stay connected to the power. If I can do that, man, my days go by so much better. I get up in the morning, I do a little bit of recovery. By 1 o'clock, I shut my phones off. I'm just being present with my wife. Um, I kind of like uh, on page 19, it tells us that we feel that the elimination of our drinking is but a beginning, but a much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes. That's number one, occupations and affairs. But I have to bring recovery into the home. I have to include her in group consciousness. If I'm going to do a speakers meeting, if it's going to affect the common welfare, I won't do it. Um, I don't put her above my recovery or I would lose everything around me. But now I do enough recovery to where I used to do it all day long, but I've cut out margins where I'm starting to recapture life. And I think that's what this program is about. It's about recapturing life while I'm connected to the spirit. There is no life if I'm not connected. We could spend hours it would be miserable. And so when I recognize that urgency, if it's urgent, it's not important. And if it's important, it's not urgent. So even if I get into like I get in that hurry mode, I just stop, say, whoa, I stop and I pray and I go at God's speed, which is 3 miles per hour. And I don't know how much time we have, but I'll just close up here. So it's important that as I go through my day, the most important thing is that I stay connected to the power, not to please God, not to so I don't lose my sobriety, but because I will never give up those other things if I don't get a bigger yes. And when I first came in, God was not better than my lust. I just, a very strong faith tradition to even say that and tell the truth, it was true. But as I started to work these steps, as I started to clean them weeds out of the garden and continue to watch and do a little gardening when needed and stay in my own little acre, man, it's beyond what's better. God is my comfort. He's love. I'm able to be right sized. I'm able to be in acceptance, and I'm able to love others the way He loves me. And I don't think I could love Him like this without Him giving me that connection and the ability to do so. So my goal today, and the reason I accepted this, is that I want to stay connected to that power. I don't ever want to go back to the life I was living, and I won't share that because it's not important here. I just want to live each day connected to my higher power, being of service to Him. When I gave up my will and my life, as I gave up my ego, my will, my decisions, my thought making, my thoughts, and my life, it's now His life to do what He wants with it, not my life. I can make a plan, but I don't plan the outcome. I just get to get up and say, God, how would you use me today? And in trade, I get Him. And there is no better gift than that. Thanks.
Thank you, Dennis. I really appreciate it. I've written some questions here, and to our live audience, if you have any questions for Dennis, please type them in the chat. If you want to remain anonymous, you don't want me to read your first name, put a remark at the beginning of your question, anonymous, please. And we'll get to those questions as we go along. But Dennis, I want to start kind of where you left off there. You said that, early on in recovery, God was not better than your lust. How did that shift happen? When did that shift happen as you were working the steps to where all of a sudden God became better than your lust and you wanted that more than you wanted lust or whatever
Yeah.
that outlet may be?
Well, coming in, I was taught that the moment of temptation, and it always starts with a thought in my mind, regardless of what it is, whether it's a temptation to drink resentment or lust, to go to God, I get 1 second. Go to God, admit my powerlessness, ask for His power. I need you, God. Um, the more I did that, the more I started to experience the second part of the third step where it says His power, His love, and His way of living. I started to experience His love. I believe when we come in, His protection is like huge. And I'm running around out there and, hey, help God. He'd help me and I'd be off and running, like, okay, thanks. And that was the pink cloud time where, man, things started getting better. I got sober. I'm loving life. I'm loving the program. I'm starting to reconnect with my wife. And, but as we get further through the program, 4 through 9 is where it really started to change. As I started to remove those blockers through working those inventories, God's presence became more powerful. It wasn't a trickle anymore, moving those rocks out of that conduit. It started to become a flow. And then it was a fountain. But then also, what I found is His protection also was not out there. Like now I have these tools. God will not remove them unless I use the tools. Like I used to just pray, oh, remove this temptation. Well, now I know why I have a temptation is because I let the weeds grow. Now I've got this resentment I'm not willing to give up. Well, just take care of the temptation, God. And God's like, I don't do that for you anymore. I need you to pray for this person. I need you to work this because in the end, if you will do that, you'll get closer to me. Pass.
Thank you, Dennis. I love this analogy that you've created here with the recovery's garden and the tools to, you got your, shovel, your spade, whatever else you use in gardening, your rake, your hoe, and everything else. Tell me a little bit about you listed a couple of tools: ask, prayer, and pausing when agitated. Are there any other tools that you weren't able to get to that you'd like to mention that are there?
Well, I think all of the tools, the 12 steps gives us spiritual principles. So all of the spiritual principles that we use and that we practice are what I'm using to stay connected to the power. So anything that would disconnect me from the power has to go. And I used to think that, well, the resentment disconnects me, or my life is unmanageable because of my drinking. No, my life is unmanageable because I'm disconnected from the power. And if I'm disconnected from the power, I have unmanageability in my life. And if I have unmanageability, I'm going to need to drink to medicate that. I guess one of the biggest tools that I didn't mention would be working with other sexaholics. Nothing so much close connects me to God than working with another sexaholic. It'd be simple as service work, uh, taking calls, but taking another individual through the 12 steps, man, that's where I show up. I don't have anything for them. I'm nobody's power. I don't have any solution, but I show up and I open up and do the set aside prayer, and God pours through me into them. And in that exchange, God pours through them into me. They're sponsoring me. I'm sponsoring them. My goal is just take them through the big book and take them through the steps so they can have that awakening. And as the more that awakening happens in them, the more we become, we always were equals, we're the equals, but God's using both of us to help, right? It says, help one, save two. So that's the most powerful tool that I have found. And Bill says on page 15 or on 14, he says that faith without works was dead. He said, and how appallingly true for the sexaholic or alcoholic addict. For if an addict or alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life, that's what it is. Connecting to God more and more is perfecting and enlarging my spiritual life. It says, through work and self sacrifice for others. He could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again. Down in the next paragraph down, Bill was struggling. He said, I was not too well at the time. I was plagued by waves of self pity and resentment. You see, there's the weeds coming up, self pity and resentment. This times nearly drove me back to drink, but I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times I've gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is designed for living that works in rough going. I went on a wilderness adventure. I was out gone 17 days. I was completely free. I come back into the world, and right away I knew the one thing I needed most wasn't a meeting. It wasn't to talk to my sponsor. It was to get one of my sponsees to work with, because that's when the power flows the most. So I put it out there. They were more than glad because they hadn't talked to me because we were in a place where there's no cell reception. And man, did that fill me up. And then the meetings and calling my sponsor and all of that is good and necessary, and being in the fellowship, but working with another sponsee, nothing compares. So if you've worked through your steps, you've had an awakening, people are asking, man, just go do it. And some people are afraid because, well, what's the format? I don't even remember. I got to go through. No, you don't. Just get your book out, get your work out, get with another person, open it up, and let God just flow. And the more you can do that, exactly what they need and I need will be revealed. Help one, save two. Pass.
Thank you. I love that. Let God flow. I don't need to have this framework of how to do this. Let God flow. Open up the book and let God flow. Question, an anonymous question here. You mentioned our troubles arise from within us. Can you expand on this? All our troubles, and how does self cause this disturbance?
That's a great question. On page 90 of the 12 and 12, it says, and I won't quote it exactly, I kind of always paraphrase it. Anytime I'm disturbed, it is always something in me. If I can hold on that as a fundamental truth, then no matter what's going on around me, other people being in their self's will, troubles, but if I get disturbed, that's something in me. If I'm disturbed with another person, usually it's because they're the mirror, they're the gift giver. They're showing me that, hey, there's something in me that I need to work on. There's something about that I don't like about what they're doing or how they're doing it that is still something in me that's causing me pain. I mean, we can have certain trials and low spots. People can be unkind, but it's how I respond to that. It's how um, if I'm in self, I'm going to react. If I'm in um, connected to the power, I'm going to respond. And it's usually in a loving way. I have to remember that when self is in play, and I just went through this morning, I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning because my one guy's in Taipei on vacation there, but it's so clear now to him. He's like, oh my gosh, this self is so destructive. The voice that's given me information is not helpful to me or ever good for me. That voice that's constantly um, resentment or self-pity, and it is so dangerous. That's the purpose of working 4 through 9, especially in the fifth step where it gets revealed like, wow, this thing is, I went to a conference and it says, my ego is not my amigo. There's so much truth to that. Yesterday I was me and my wife got this major project done and it snowed a lot out where it's dangerous to be out. I said, I want to go get Chinese food. Let's celebrate. She didn't want to. My daughter needed to be picked up. I took her over to a thing. I thought we had time. I went to get Chinese food and go back home for an hour, but no, it only took 10 minutes. So I got the food. I picked her up. I took her back home. And I thought, I just gave it to her and her friend. They could have it. And I get home and boy, right away, the temptation is like, oh, I didn't get my Chinese food. That's where the temptation, I'm like, whoa. When that voice came and said that, if I was in self, man, I would have just drank that in. I would have put it around like a little blanket, got home and told my wife, oh, I didn't get the Chinese food, and but the minute I spotted that, because I was connected to the power, I recoiled from it. Like, ooh, I don't want to listen to that and I don't want to engage in that voice. If I reason or listen to it or contemplate or debate, I'm already gone. I'm a dead man. When those thoughts come, I just immediately recoil from it because I know the difference. I've practiced this enough, being in the sunlight of the spirit, being connected to power. I know when that temptation, that thought that comes in that wants to draw me away, and I recoil from them. I do not, I don't do it on my own power, but it's just like what all the prayers would always get me connected. Now it's just like, hey, God, I want to be with you. Boom, I'm with him. Pass.
Thank you. And that's such a hard thing for me, for so many others, because that voice has been my whole life has been the
Yeah.
voice that I trust, that I think is protecting me and keeping me from harm. Hey, you don't have to tell the whole truth here because you need to protect
Yeah.
yourself from that. Or I didn't get my Chinese food. Well, I'm a victim. I really, really wanted that. How do you exercise that muscle of recognizing quicker and quicker when that voice is in there?
It it's the same way I did when the 4 step. When I first did my 4 step, my resentment inventories, and I was going into my 11th step, and I said like I would get up and go, okay, I'm really going to watch today for dishonesty or resentment, and so I would like be on guard. That didn't work because I would be so deep into the resentment by the time I was aware of it that I would be tangled up in it. I would be interacting with that voice that is just full of fear. I'd be like, whoa. And I would be all tangled up in it. And I'd had to do a lot of work. I think I have to pray and say, God, thank you for your power that I may continue to watch. Because it has to be when we're connected to the spirit. I'm not living in my thinking or my brain. I'm living in my heart and the spirit. And the spirit shows me that, not me. I have to rely on when there's a shift in if I get disturbed, I know right in that moment, ooh, something's up here. Um, but I can't rely on my self's will to defeat self's will. It has to be on the power. And the more we practice it, the more night and day it is. It's like, ooh, boy, I'm back over here again. Every day there's an attempt by self's will to regain control from me. I wish it was a one and done. If I could just go live with God every day, I would. But that's why it's a 24-hour program. That's where I start every morning in the third step prayer. It says, God, I offer sacrifice. Offer me sacrifice. This self to you. Hey, build with me and do with me as you want. It's your life now. Relieve me of the bondage of self. It's not saying the bondage of alcohol or drugs or lust. It's not saying that. I need to actively, like it says back on 87, especially removing any self's will. That's the problem. It means destruction of self's will has to happen. And that only comes from asking, hey, God, today just let me remove this and give me the awareness when it's starting to come up. The three A's: awareness, action, awareness, acceptance, and then action. I can accept, like, oh, here it is. And then my action may be prayer work. It may be, sometimes it's just sitting in the uncomfortableness of something and not just doing it. But I always rely on the power to show me. And my tool is to seek getting back connected, to seek connected to God. Pass.
Thanks, Dennis. You mentioned earlier, and this sits on that third step prayer or any of your morning prayers as you're going out of bed, getting out of bed. You mentioned that if you aren't feeling that connection as you're coming out of bed, you immediately stop rather than push through it. I've heard people say you gotta act your way into good thinking rather than think your way into good acting. So why stop rather than just going through and then analyzing? Why stop at that point?
Well, number one, it could just be a rote prayer. Like I'm just going to just say it, say it, say it, say it, and get up and start my day. But it's because I want to be with God. I want to experience his presence with me. So I could say it. I don't think God cares one way or the other. Well, maybe he does care. I don't know about that. I mean, he's not going to hold it against me, but I want to start my day with him and I want to be with him. The greatest gift that I get out of the program is him. That's it. And for every one of you out there, his greatest gift that he gets is you. He loves you unconditionally. There's nothing I can do to cause him to affect that love. He wants more than anything for me to be with him. And I have to, I mean, it took a lot of pain, but the reward was just being with him. I feel comforted. I feel at peace. I love to feel at peace. And so if I don't feel him, then I'm holding on to something. But I can't say that if I just went ahead and did my prayers, would I just come back around? Maybe. I think so, but I don't want at that morning time is such a sweet spot. I don't want to miss that. I got a whole day to go, and I really want to just start my day off. Not so he'll do stuff for me or do things. I'm not wanting him to do anything my way because my way is going to end up out in my program again or my illness. I just want to be with him and I want to be with him all day. And it does take some effort. It's like a beautiful garden is a beautiful garden because somebody has went out daily and picked weeds. They'll see a weed and they'll take time to just pick it. And then they can truly enjoy what God has for them in their life. That's the life. That's the garden of life. Pass.
Thank you. All right. Question comes in from Annalise, and maybe you have a resource, but the question is, where do we find the prayers for each step?
Well, I guess I'll just try and real quick go through mine. I wake up in the morning and I say, God, first I thank him. God, thank you for this day to day. Thank you for your abundance in my life. Thank you for letting me wake up sober. I don't take that for granted anymore, even though it's been 10 years. God, I am powerless and I need your power. Please lend me your power just for today. And then I do my third step prayer. And after I do the third step prayer, I do my seventh step prayer. All right, I do my third step. Then I do, because I love doing them. And I don't just do them, I slow down and I kind of let them absorb in. Think about what I'm saying instead of just saying them. Do my seventh step prayer. And then all through the book, there's little pieces. One that I'm going to add, I mean, here I've been saying these prayers for 10 years. And on page 164, at the end of every meeting, they have read, and I can't remember what it's called. On page 210 in the white book, it's, what is it? What do they call that?
A vision for you.
Yeah, let's read A Vision for You. Because our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask Him in your morning prayer what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. How many times I've heard that and read that? I don't pray that. So I believe how we do the prayers is as we go through the book, we see something that touches us. We thought, oh, I'm going to add that. So I'm going to add that somewhere in my prayer work. Hey, God, I'm going to pray show me what I can do each day for the man who is still sick. And I believe if I pray that, God will show me. So I love then, and I don't know if it's on page 84 or where it's at, and if you guys know, you can jump in, but I think it's 80. But the one where it says, after my seventh step prayer, I say, God, I pray that you direct my thinking today. I need that, especially divorcing it from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. It could be resentment. I mean, the list is long of all the things. Mine is victim mentality. Man, I need him. When I'm in victim mentality, I need to know. Show me the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. Then I go right into thank you for your power that I may continue to watch. Then I do my 11th step prayer. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring a spirit of forgiveness. And I do my 11th step, right out of the 11th step. You'll find stuff in there that touch you. Just start adding it into your prayer work. I do that, and then I do the submission prayer, which we will do at the end of this meeting. And then I do the Our Father at the end. And then maybe a little bit of just thanking God or being with him. But I think prayer work has to be very personal. But I think as you ask God to show you, as you go through your literature and your books, and it'll just touch you. It's like, wow, that really connects me. Throw that in your morning prayers and spend time like quietly and being present. If I'm not present, am I doing stuff during the day that I'm medicating a little bit? Not with my lust or anything, but there's things that I can do that dull down that connection. And when I do, I get rid of them instantly, like, oh, they got to go. Except first I might do it, play a little video game or something. I don't do gaming, but I think, oh, that ain't too bad. And about day two, I'm like, whoa, I don't feel God like I normally do. I know where that's coming from. I get rid of it. Nothing's going to get above me being that connection. I need that. Pass.
Thanks, Dennis. And thank you to one of our anonymous attendees here who sent a link in with some recovery prayers where you can find some of those things. I just posted it in the chat, and I'll put it in the show notes of the meeting. So, Dennis, one of the things that you brought up that is something that you and I have talked a little bit about this before, that is still, I'm not wrapping my head around, is this idea that resentment or fear or whatever is not what is separating me from God, but it's an indication that I'm already separated. Why don't you dive just a little bit deeper into that and help us understand that a little bit more?
Well, I can have two attitudes. Like one is, hey, God, help me here. And then I'm connected, everything's great. Well, then I just go about my way. I'm just going to go about my day, living my life. And what happens when I kind of just go about my way, it's so subtle. Like can't tell when self is starting to take back over. But I'm separating because now I'm kind of doing things, I'm back to doing things on my own power. And I don't recognize it. But anytime I get back into my own power or relying on myself, my ego, my pride, then these things start cropping up because they don't crop up when I'm connected to the power. They are non existent. Remember what it says that We're being placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We haven't even sworn off. I think we learn to surrender our, in my case, lust, temptations. Then I have to, the same with it, or if not more, surrender resentment and fear temptations. Because why do I have a resentment? Well, because I have an expectation. Well, why do I have an expectation? Well, it's because I'm needing to try and control some outcome so that I can be okay, so that I can feel the emptiness that is happening because of my separation. So I get back into this self, and it is like a well-worn groove, and we build new ones. So for me, I don't know why I have to leave. All I do is I know I do leave, and I can tell when I'm leaving that I'm disturbed. I don't know if that answers it or not.
Well, I think it clarifies things a little bit more as I continue to walk this path and see, well, God will constantly disclose more to you and to us, and I that's a promise that I have absolutely witnessed in my life, and I'm so grateful that that disclosure, that line upon line thing exists, because it just well, it keeps me coming back. What else is going to be new, God? What surprise me, right? And that excites me and helps
I
me.
want to share one thing on that on
Yeah,
page
please.
87. If everybody wants to go to 87, it's really important. My sponsor taught me this as part of the 11th step work. The very last sentence on 86, very last sentence on 86. No, a sentence up. Here we ask God for inspiration and intuitive thought or decision. We relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. We're often surprised how the right answers come after we have, and box in, tried this for a while. Okay, so me practicing the we asks, me practicing going to God about this stuff. What used to be a hunch or occasional inspiration box in gradually becomes a working part of my mind. Being still in experience and having just made conscious contact with God, it is not probable that we are going to be inspired at all times. We might pay for this presumption and all sorts of absurd actions and ideas, but nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, box in, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. That inspiration is when I'm connected to God. My thinking is different. It just is. And we come to rely upon that. So as we start practicing this, it's going to tell me, well, after I've tried this for a while, gradually, and as time passes, it's going to become more and more the norm or where I'm living versus, I hang out here for a while, then I go back in and try and live life over here. Then I go back and connect. It's not so much that I'm going back to connect for the reprieves. I'm going to start living more in the reprieves and not have to get so far back out. God willing, I don't stay in that middle part long enough to where I really start getting tempted for lust. I do not want to get that far down. If I'm there, man, I have blown past so many tools and being in self. And I must be in a place of rebellion and unwillingness at that point. Because if I ask for willingness, God gives it to me. If I ask for God for inspiration, thoughts or actions, He does that. He will always give me the tools to use to stay connected to Him. It's when I get stubborn or rebellion that I find myself back, oh, why am I tempted? Temptations come. The difference between they are, if I'm in the spirit and the temptation comes, I don't want that. Honestly, I'm like, oh no, I recoil from it. But if I'm back in the weeds and the temptation comes, I'm wanting it. And then if I'm wanting it, yeah, I'll go to God, I'll pray, I'll work my work. Ultimately, that brings me back to Him. But if I get to a place where I'm wanting it, I know I'm pretty far down the road and I don't want to live there no more. Because one day it could take me out and I will never come back into this program. I know that's a possibility. I've seen it, and I'll lose everything. I don't want that.
Yeah, me neither. Thank you, Dennis. So before we wrap up, are you feeling any other words of wisdom, anything else that God's saying, hey, Dennis, I need you to share this with these people?
Mm. Just just quiet yourself and go to your higher power and ask that, let him know you just want to be with him. And I'm telling you, he will make that possible. He will give you the tools to be with him because that's what he wants more than anything is to be with you. Pass.
Thank you so much, Dennis, for a fantastic Rico 12 speaker meeting. If anybody out here had more questions for Dennis or anything else come up that you'd like to discuss, please consider joining our WhatsApp community. You can email me at rico12pod@gmail.com to join in that conversation. If you haven't already done so, please consider rating and reviewing the podcast in Apple Podcasts. It's a good way to share and work your step 12 by sharing this message with others. Next Friday, we'll hear from a Rico 12 first timer, Chris A., whose topic will be change and transformation. I'm excited to hear from Chris and to hear that message, experience strength and hope. Stay tuned in the WhatsApp community. Get on the email list. If you're not already on the email list, you can do that by sending me an email at rico12pod@gmail.com, and we'll get you in there. Now, let's launch off into the rest of our day with the submission prayer that Dennis mentioned earlier that he'll close us out with.
Yeah, and this is a prayer that I do toward the end of my prayers before the last one. It's where I'm going to offer, God, I give this day to you. Establish the work of my hands, the steps of my feet, the words of my mouth, the direction of my gaze, the thoughts of my mind, and the attitude of my heart. Amen.
Amen. Everybody, there's one who has all power. That one is God. May you find God now. Keep coming back. And when you do, come all the way in, sit all the way down. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.
I've seen stars fall from above. I've fallen in and out of love. I've been high and I've been low. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. I've seen a boy become a man. He got lost without a plan. He's so far away from home. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me. Your touch is grounding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. I'm looking for the words to say. You make the world a better place, and I can call that place my home. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me. Your touch is grounding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. So let me see just what you need to set you free, so we can be free. I saw stars fall from above. I fell in and out of love. I got high and I fell low. But now I know that I just can't do this on my own. No, I just can't do this on my own. I just can't do this on my own.